What's good? How are we doing?
All right. How are you?
I'm not bad. I'm not bad. I think there's a lot we could talk about, but I think if you're trying to do a short call, maybe something super broad isn't great. So do you wanna chat about Israel?
Sure. Well, what other topics might you
Hmm.
potentially be interested in?
I think that there are at least plausible arguments for theism. I mean, I'm a socialist. Let's see what else. I think other than that, I think ethical egoism is probably wrong. But yeah, I think all of those are going to be sort of pretty
Okay.
broad conversations. But I'm down to chat about any of them. But
Okay. Well, how about we do whichever one you're most interested in first, and then we'll see how long that takes, and then decide later
sure, yeah. I've been I've
where to
been
go on.
been arguing about Israel recently, so maybe we can chat about Israel stuff. So
Okay.
is your view that Israel has engaged sort of broadly justly in the invasion of Gaza?
I think so. Yeah. I don't follow the war closely,
Okay.
like on a day-to-day basis.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but from my distance following of it, um, yeah, I don't have a problem with what they've actually. I think they've been far too weak. I would say they should be far more aggressive in
Hmm.
not being as concerned about civilian casualties. I think the that's the fault of Hamas. I think because Hamas is using them as human shields, or maybe a better example is the hostages. I
Hmm.
think they shouldn't have negotiated for the hostages. I think they should have just treated them as dead from the beginning and just gone all out and gotten the war over and done with long ago
Hmm.
instead of dragging on for months and months. We're like over 2 years now, coming up on
Sure.
three
Yeah,
years.
I think Israel has been like ridiculous, sort of minimally ridiculously negligent in terms of Palestinian civilian casualties. I mean, I think that like I mean, one example is there's this sort of independent convergence of a bunch of reports of the same kind of pattern, where and this is just sort of ground troop stuff, and I think arguably at least post the like fifth day, the aerial campaigns were worse. But on the ground, there's sort of these convergent reports of issuing evacuation orders and then treating everybody that comes in as like an enemy combatant, and then also like killing obvious civilians and then covering it up. There's like independent reporting from like just truly a bunch of different orgs that seem to follow that pattern, and it also is more consistent with the sort of patterns of death, right? Like the relative to other even urban combat, um, women and children are way more overrepresented, like way more overrepresented among the demographics of combat deaths. Like which is obviously at least some evidence in favor of significant negligence. And I think that like the idea that this is just because Hamas is embedded in civilian infrastructure is implausible for a number of reasons. I mean, one example is that like we have lots of examples of urban combat with militants embedding in civilian infrastructure where they don't have this kind of ridiculous pattern of civilian death. Like the Battle of Mosul is, I think, a good example of this, where ISIS was behaving far worse than Hamas was, like ushering civilians at gunpoint into areas where they were going to fire after. Like, there's not examples of Hamas doing that. Um, Doing stuff like welding doors shut for civilians, so civilians had to stay in their homes. Obviously, Hamas hasn't done any of that, and still, the U.S. and our allies were able to not have anywhere near the ridiculous sort of civilian casualties and the ridiculous demographics of dead that Israel has incurred in its engagement. So I think that like we just have lots of evidence that they're being minimally ridiculously negligent. I think there's at least significant evidence for intentional targeting of civilians, and violation of conventions against genocide. But yeah, I guess I'm curious what you think about that.
All right. Well, um, you probably are more up to speed on a lot of these war details than I am, but I
Mm.
do think the fact that they haven't won yet shows that they've been too weak. I don't. I think maybe this gets into other issues like egoism. Like, should you put your own interest first? I think you should, and I don't think they're doing that. If they were, I think they would prioritize victory, their own victory, over concern about civilian casualties on the other side, which I think
Okay,
are
so
the
so
fault
would you say,
of.
for example, that like during the Second World War, like sort of German policy of like total extermination. Insofar as that was helpful for their aims, they should have done that.
No, I think that was evil because
Okay.
Nazi Germany is an evil regime. They were killing innocent people. That was their goal. See, they were they were targeting innocent people, whereas Israel is targeting evil people, and innocent people get caught in the crossfire. But that's
Well,
not
that's
who's
I think
being
that's at
targeted.
least very disputable. But so suppose there was a policy of just like literally everyone they see they gunned down, and they did this in order to like their sort of goal they had in mind was to eliminate Hamas, but the policy was just literally exterminate the entire strip. Do you think that this would be like just conduct?
I mean, if they saw that as the only way to achieve victory, I doubt it is. I think they could be much
Mm-hmm.
more strategic, and I think they have been strategic and tactical about um, bombing certain places where they think Hamas is hiding out. They don't just willy nilly drop bombs anywhere. They have some reason for the
Sure.
places they target. But if we stipulate that the only way is just to indiscriminately kill anyone, I would say yeah, I guess. But I don't think that is the only way for them to
Sure.
achieve
Yeah.
victory.
All I was trying to get at there was that it seems like it seems like very plausible to me, at least, that militaries have a responsibility to sort of be discriminate, right? And that Israel is very plausibly violating this responsibility because we have examples of urban combat with far worse conduct on the part of the militants in terms of like embedding in civilian infrastructure that don't incur these kind of ridiculous civilian casualties and ridiculous demographics of the dead. And so it seems like we have at least strong prima facie evidence that this isn't like a necessary consequence of urban combat against guerrilla fighters and is instead a consequence of negligence on the part of Israel. Minimally negligence. Again, I think there's at least strong evidence for intent, but I think we should get to negligence first before we, yeah.
Well, maybe you have different sources than I've come across, at least secondhand. Like I've heard that
Mhm.
Israel has a lower than average civilian casualty rate, um, given the
Yeah, I
type of
think
warfare it's engaged in.
it's hard to so you have what's called the modifiable area unit problem, which is just like where you put like what you consider relevantly similar to Israel's conduct or Israel's war in Gaza is going to change that very much. Although there are just straightforwardly false things that like charlatans will say about like, you know, average ratio is 9-1, right? That's just false. Like no serious scholar believes that. So I guess I don't know specifically what you're citing, and it's hard to be super confident in like averages and even what we're averaging across. But I think that like minimally we have examples of militaries. And again, the U.S. was like still criticized for our behavior in the Battle of Mosul and similar battles. But even in those like widely criticized battles, the U.S. was able to like just not incur this kind of ridiculous damage against again forces that were like however bad you think Hamas is in terms of embedding in civilian infrastructure, like ISIS is like 10 times more cartoonishly ridiculously evil in terms of that. And even still, the U.S. was able to not incur these kind of um, civilian this level and demographic of civilian casualties. And so it just seems like Israel is. We have some reason to think Israel should be able to not incur these kind of civilian casualties and accomplish their goals. They're failing to, and as such, we should oppose them.
Well, I don't think the war in Iraq was a good example, or the war in Afghanistan, of a good example of good rules of engagement. Like people
No,
who
I agree.
know
Yeah,
more about this than I do have said that the rules of engagement were such that the U.S. troops were effectively fighting with one hand behind their back. And I've heard things like they have to wait until they're fired upon until they can fire back, or at least wait until they're somehow threatened by, I don't know exactly what the rules are, but it was much too restrictive um, in the objectivist view. These are objectivists who know more about this than I do, but um, we lost
mm.
thousands of people in both the Iraq
Yeah,
and the Afghanistan war, and I don't think the Iraq war was even good to go into in the first place.
sure, sure. I would
but
imagine, yeah.
I
I
wouldn't
don't
see
know that there are
those as
many
like as
objectivists who are pro Iraq War. Maybe I'm missing out on somebody, but I would imagine that's the general view. But I guess so. I mean, I'm going to disagree, but it seems like, I guess, maybe there's this more fundamental ethical problem where it seems like you have this kind of quasi-collectivist view where the individual's interests are tied to the interests of the nation in this way that means that we should treat, like, the rights and the ways that we should treat individuals differ on the basis of their national identity in these, like, fundamental ethical ways. And that seems implausible to me.
well, I don't think war is a different context than the criminal justice system. So
Hmm.
I don't think the right way to prosecute a war is to go person by person and give them a trial. Whereas in the criminal
Hmm.
justice system, that is what should be
Sure.
done. So I don't see it as collectivism to engage in a war that results in innocent people on the other side dying. I think that's just the tragic.
Well, that's not what I said was collectivism. What I said was collectivism was this idea that it's sort of an extension of the individual's interest, is this like concept of the national interest, and that those interests are like fundamentally tied such that membership in the national group means that you're like owed and due different rights, and your interests should be respected in different ways. And it seems like that's a violation of what I see as like the parts of libertarian ethical commitments. Or I guess I don't know if you're one of the Randians that thinks libertarianism isn't Rand's philosophy, but the sort of broadly individualistic commitments of Rand.
I am, yeah, I do reject libertarianism as a label for my view.
Sure, yeah.
I don't see a
But
tension
we can use
between,
individualism, but
yeah.
yeah.
So I don't see a tension between a philosophy of individualism and one that upholds the national self-interest, so long as it's understood by the national self-interest to mean the interest of the individuals within a nation. So there is no national self-interest over and above or apart from the interests
Hmm.
of the individuals that compose a nation. I think there's a
Do you
harmony.
think the same is true of racial interest?
Um, I don't really, I don't think in terms of race with like politically. I don't think that's an essential
Sure, but suppose someone did, right? Do you think that
category.
you'd have grounds to reject that kind of thinking? It seems like the same arguments that you're giving here could be given to justify that kind of like, suppose somebody had this individualist objection to like racialism. You could similarly there say, well, no, we're not anti-individualists. We're just, understanding racial interests as nothing over and above individual members of a race, right? And that seems implausible to me. And
Well,
it seems like the arguments you're giving can't work if we think that
I
they
think there is a
wouldn't work in
valid,
this case.
there's at least some context where it's valid to talk about what's in the nation's self-interest, but I'm less willing to go along with the idea that there are contexts that's um, where it would be valid to talk about a race's self-interest. I mean, if there are any such contexts, they might be benign contexts, like medical contexts, like maybe for Black people they need less vitamin D or something because they have more melanin in their skin. I don't know. I'm not a
Sure.
doctor, but there might be certain things where race is actually relevant. Um, but in the context of politics, um, I'm not seeing how race would be relevant. I mean, I think what's good for one is good for all, regardless of race. Like freedom, I think it's good for every individual to be free, regardless of
But
race.
not in the context of national identity, right? You think it would be bad for Palestinians to be free from like, being systematically sort of terror bombed and things like that, right? Relative to the alternative, which is, not doing that sort of thing.
I mean, I think it would be bad for anyone to be. I mean, it's bad for any individual to be unjustly killed, but I don't
Hmm.
think that's what's happening in a war of self-defense where an innocent person is killed as a result of collateral damage, or now if they're being targeted, I would say that is an unjust killing, but I don't think
Hmm.
Palestinians are being targeted. Non-combatant Palestinians are being targeted.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess I just don't know. Like, I guess it's sort of unclear to me why you would think that. So I guess there's sort of two worries. One is just that it seems like you don't care about discrimination all that much, right? Like, I think that's like a sort of secondary principle, right, to like military interests.
I don't care about discrimination. Well, what I mean,
Because it seems like oh, sorry.
what kind of discrimination? Like, I think it's bad if someone is like only allows certain people of a certain race or
Oh, sorry.
white
I meant
people
discrimination
to.
as in the principle of like just war, not like
Oh,
bigotry. Like as in being as in the crime of indiscriminate targeting of civilian, that sort of thing.
yeah.
Because
So I
earlier
think,
it seemed
yeah.
like,
Well,
oh,
I do
sorry.
think indiscriminate dropping of bombs is not good. I don't think Israel's doing that.
Hmm.
But if they just willy nilly, I actually used that before. I don't think it would be good
Hmm.
for them to just randomly drop bombs anywhere. I think it's good that they are targeting, insofar as possible, where they think Hamas is.
I guess it's not clear to me that they're doing that in a way that like we think they should. Right? Like 80% of civilian infrastructure has been significantly damaged by. Like, do you sincerely think Israel had good reason to believe that 80% of buildings were harboring Hamas militants or Hamas infrastructure? Like that seems
Oh,
ridiculously
well, yeah,
implausible.
let me add. So I do think it can be justifiable to knock out civilian infrastructure. Um, I guess better to do it when there's no civilians in there, but as a
Hmm.
way of putting pressure on the enemy country.
Mm.
And maybe I should add, I think a lot of the non-combatants actually support Hamas. I've heard there have been polls that show a majority of
Yeah,
Palestinians actually
although
support Hamas. So that raises a
lots of
question as to
Israelis have
whether
like
they are like
objectionable.
entirely innocent.
Well, that's I think a principle you don't want to endorse, right? Like, do you think the fact that majority of Israelis support expelling Arab citizens of Israel means that you can sort of indiscriminately target Israeli citizens?
If a majority of Israelis support deporting Arab citizens, does that
Not if.
justify?
That is, to be clear, what the polling data shows, right? So I'm saying the principle you're applying, which is just that if the population has objectionable or sort of views in line with some objectionable military goal, then they're not like genuinely civilians, or they're due less consideration, is going to mean that like targeting Israeli civilians is going to be permissible. And it seems like you probably don't want to say that, right?
Well, I think it depends on whether their view is justified. Like if the reason that Israelis want to um, deport Arabs is because they think the Arabs are somehow aiding or abetting terrorists who would kill them, then I would see that that
But
provides a
notice now
reason.
earlier you said that you couldn't think of contexts where sort of racial self-interest is sort of politically important, and so maybe there's these benign contexts. But now you're saying that there are contexts where not only is it important, it's so important that you think it might be just to do race-based deportations, right? Like that's you understand that's like a ridiculous jump, right?
Race-based deportations. Well, I mean, I think if
Which
you
is
can.
which is to be clear, what a majority of Israelis support.
Okay, well, I'm not. I'm not comfortable now endorsing that. Like, if you know an
Okay.
individual Arab is friendly to the Israeli government, I don't think that person should be deported just because they're Arab. So, at least
Well, no,
insofar as it's
this
possible
is
to treat.
just. Mhm. All I'm trying to demonstrate here is I don't think the principle you endorsed, which was that when civilians have views that endorse objectionable military actions, or state actions, they become less deserving of like civilian protections, or it becomes more acceptable to like not care about their interests as much. That principle is going to lead you to thinking that Palestinians attacking, or even Arab Israelis attacking Israeli citizens is justified. And it seems like you don't want to say that, right?
Yeah, I don't think I would because I think the rationale of attacking Israelis is unjustified. Whereas I
Well, no, but
think
the point is
that,
the same rationale,
well, I don't see it
which is
as the
that,
same going on
well,
both.
the rationale is that there are these objectionable actions supported by, like, for example, like even more Israelis will support things like there are no statements like there are no civilians in Gaza, things like we shouldn't care at all about suffering of Gazans, right? Like that polls even higher than race-based deportations. And so like they're willing to support like whatever you think is objectionable about Hamas, which I would imagine is something like they don't care about Israeli civilian suffering and they're acting in these like horrific ways. Like lots of significant majorities of Israelis would support Israeli military acting in the same way. So the point is just that your principle, which is that when civilian populations endorse these kinds of objectionable views, they get less protection, is going to lead you to thinking that Israeli civilians deserve less protection. And so given that you don't want to say that, you should reject the principle.
I might need to write this down to keep track because
Sure. So it's. I mean, you can think about it as just like a modus tollens, right? It's just if the relevantly objectionable views held by civilian populations means that they're more legitimate targets, then Israeli civilians are more legitimate targets. Israeli civilians, on your view, are not more legitimate targets, and thus relevantly objectionable views by civilian populations does not mean they're more legitimate targets. So it's just simple modus tollens.
Okay, so I think there's more validity to being concerned about people on I'll just call it the Palestinian side than there is for being concerned about people on the Israeli side, because I see the Palestinian side or the
What?
Hamas side as the aggressors in this war. So if you
Oh,
sympathize
do you
with
think
the
that?
aggressors, then
Hmm.
I think your view is wrong. Whereas you're sympathizing with the Israeli side, I think you're sympathizing with the self-defense side.
Yeah. So I think so. Your view is that like basically regardless of Israel's conduct. So a it seems like now you're sort of restricting the principle, which is about to something just specifically about aggression. Now I think that I don't know. It seems aggressive to me to like control entirely the imports and exports of a country, to impose military rule on another country, to like impose like to be able to police a region without you're like any democratic representation for the people in the police population. Like that seems like a kind of aggression, right? Like
I
allowing
don't think so.
militant settlers. But so you don't think that like so if tomorrow China like totally blockaded the U.S., you wouldn't see that as an act of aggression?
No, I would, because I don't see a
Okay, so we agree that's
justification for
aggression, right?
such a blockade, but I do see a justification for Israel putting blockades on, like around Gaza. It's like if they're
Well,
importing
not, but now the
weapons from
principle keeps
Iran,
shifting.
right?
It's not that you don't like aggression; it's that you don't like aggression. You don't think is justified, right?
No, it's that I think we have a different view on what is aggression in the actual case
Yeah,
here.
but I guess maybe it seems like you're just then normatively loading the concept of aggression such that it's something like unjust. It's just means unjust action in this way. But then it's just going to be question begging, right? To say that Israel is or not the aggressor and that Palestine is the aggressor.
I don't think it's loading it to. I mean, I guess you could say it's loaded, but I think it's just part of the meaning, at least as I understand aggression, that you are unjustified in doing it. Like, let's take another example.
But that's just to beg the question, right?
Like if I punch someone on the street, just a random person, someone who hasn't done anything against me, I would say that's an act of aggression. And I would also say that's unjustified. Right
Sure.
now, if someone punches me and then I punch that person back, I would say that's an act of self-defense and a justified one. I wouldn't call it an act of aggression when I'm punching back someone who has first punched me.
Yeah, no, I agree in that case, right? But what I'm saying is that it seems like your concept of aggression is something like unjust, like imposition or I don't know, action to frustrate somebody's, and like I don't know, however, but it seems like just part of what you mean by aggression is going to be that sort of justify that it's going to include
Initiating
a
force.
unjust.
Another way you could put it is initiating force. I take that to be what aggression is. And I
And you
think it's
think aggression
unjust
is
to initiate force.
oh well that I think is a ridiculously implausible. You think it's always unjust to initiate force?
Yeah, at least if we're talking in an adult context. Like you can
Sure,
use
yeah,
force to
like
stop your 3-year-old child from
sure,
running
yeah,
into
yeah.
the
Children are
street.
maybe that
But if
type
we're
of thing.
talking
I don't
about
know. Like here's
adults,
I think this kind of like ridiculous, like sort of total non-aggression principle has these like wild like I mean, here's an example, right? Like suppose there's a global pandemic, you've got one person who's immune, and in order to synthesize a cure, that will prevent everyone from dying. You have to pluck a single hair off that person's head. It seems like that's going to be aggression. And suppose the person, refuses any. They're just sort of irrational. They don't want you to pluck that head of hair. It seems like plucking that is going to be aggression, but it's obviously going to be a kind of justified aggression, right?
What's the example? So there's going to be a pandemic unless you
imagine like a global pandemic that you somehow know is going to kill all of humanity or whatever, and then the only way to stop it is to synthesize a vaccine using the hair of the one immune person on Earth, right? And that one immune person refuses to let you take a single piece of their hair. Like in that case, you could obviously take a piece of their hair, but it seems like you're obviously initiating force against them, right?
I think that might be an emergency case where
so we agree that aggression is not always impermissible, right?
Yeah, like lifeboat cases.
Okay.
Ayn Rand gives that example in one of her essays, The Ethics of Emergencies.
Okay. Sorry, I thought earlier you said initiating force is aggression, and aggression was always unjustified. Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, it's a general principle, and there are some. If there's an emergency case, I don't think it applies. But I think the context we're talking about, it does apply. Like if we're talking about the Israeli-Hamas conflicts, I think one side is the aggressor, the Hamas side, and they are not justified in aggressing against Israel. So I don't see that.
Yeah, but the reason you gave for that was just that Israel hadn't engaged in aggression, and then I gave these cases where it seems like Israel is initiating force, and then you said something like, well, it's reasonable for them to initiate force.
No, I don't think it is initiating force when it's engaging in the blockade. I think there wasn't a blockade, I don't think, until these places posed a threat to Israel.
So you think that, like,
firing rockets, for example, and then it imposed
so I guess there's a
blockade.
Couple things. Do you think that, like, literally, like, it seems like now you're just saying that, like, Israel, if a single Palestinian militant group fires a single rocket, then Israel is justified in, like, imposing military rule on them indefinitely. And that seems implausible, right?
I don't know if their government sanctions that one rocket and they're like in favor of allowing people to just fire rockets and they don't crack down on their own citizens, then maybe it is fine for Israel to impose some kind of blockade,
indefinite military rule, and it would be totally unjust to like try to
until and unless their government cracks down on their people, then Israel is going to have to crack down on them.
Okay. So here's a scenario. I don't know if you have opinions about Russia-Ukraine, right? Like, because it is the case that there were like these Ukrainian militant groups that were like resistant to certain kinds of Russian presence before the invasion, even before Crimea. And if the government was like negligent in going after those people, you think like Russian invasion would be like totally justified, or?
Well, so there's Ukrainians who were opposed to Russian presence in Ukraine?
There was like instances of Ukrainian militant groups launching against across the Russian military across the border before Russian invasion.
Well, if it's a preemptive attack, then I think it could be justified. Just like in the '67 war with Israel. Israel fired first. Because I think they saw the Egyptians mounting troops on their border, and rather than wait for them to attack, I think you can justifiably attack first. Or like
but it seems like now you're totally justifying if Palestinians thought that like I mean. So I guess there's two things. One is just that now your view seems like you have to have a specific opinion on who like initiated the conflict in order to know whether or not Israel is permitted to indiscriminately bomb civilian infrastructure, and that seems like those two shouldn't hinge on one another. And
why?
Because it seems like
there's relevance as to who
maybe
initiated the conflict.
Do you think that like if like okay when the U.S. invaded, I guess the problem is just that this then turns into like you get these ridiculously immoral, or what seem like, I think to most people, ridiculously immoral actions that militaries get to take. And again, I think that all of this is complicated by the fact that like Hamas has not been elected. Like in the lifetimes of most people in Gaza, they have not voted for Hamas. Like there was the one, it was 2006, right? Election. Like the vast majority of Gazans did not vote in that election. So understanding them as responsible for the actions of their government, I think, is pretty implausible. But even aside from that, it just seems like we shouldn't think that this allows for like infinite, indiscriminate bombing, like forever, right? And then when they resist, and when civilians are quite upset by the fact that they're being blockaded or indiscriminately bombed, and sort of endorse like violent action against that, that serves as further justification to not care about civilian interests. Like this seems like this is going to just be the infinite civilian suffering machine that you've just set up here.
Okay, well, um, I don't know why you say indiscriminate. I don't think they are. And we've talked about this some. Maybe you're not
Well, no, but
convinced.
yeah. So you said earlier. So the argument I gave was just that it seems like if you think that they're being like discriminate, you should think that like something like nearly or around 80% of civilian infrastructure had Hamas militants inside of it, or Hamas military infrastructure, right? And that seems implausible to me, given that like 80% of civilian infrastructure has been significantly damaged by bombing campaigns. It seems like if you think they're being discriminate, you should think significant majorities of that had, or at least Israel had reason to believe that there was Hamas inside, or military infrastructure
No,
inside.
no. I said at one point I think it can be justified to destroy civilian infrastructure, at least if you don't think there are civilians in there at the time. Like if you roof knock and or
Well,
somehow
roof
you
knocking
roof
has
knock.
gone down significantly. Like it's my understanding is that, and there's reporting from soldiers on this, that like roof knocking was like a thing that some individual commanders sort of decided to have their divisions do, but it was not systematic policy, and it has become super duper uncommon. Um, and I mean, further, still like evacuation orders are more common, but like it just seems like this is not like what Russia is accused of in Mariupol, for example, is issuing evacuation orders and then treating everyone who stayed as basically combatants. And like it seems like everybody, all the like liberals agree that that's like a ridiculous policy to adopt in the Russian case, if it's true that Russia did that. But it seems like you're saying that's like totally fine if conditional on thinking that, if you thought that Russia was aggressed upon, for example.
I haven't thought much about whether if you give evacuation orders and people just stay there, whether it's legit to bomb it anyways. I guess I'm at least open to the idea that yeah, it is legit if you've given them an order
Okay, I
to
just think
leave and
that
they haven't.
this means that you're going to be endorsing like all of the things people are mad at Bashar al-Assad for, or at least the vast majority of them. You're going to be endorsing like lots of what are supposed to be the ridiculously evil actions of Russia, right? Like this just puts you at odds with what I take to be the sort of liberal consensus on laws of war. And also, I think it's just a ridiculously unintuitive view that you just get to like issue evacuation orders, and then if people are like, "No, this invading army isn't going to just like get to take my town," then you get to bomb their civilian infrastructure. Like,
Well,
like,
I'm not
like,
sure
does that
why
not sound
that's
at all unintuitive to you?
um at least on I'm not it doesn't strike me as obviously wrong.
Like, I think
Maybe
we have
it's
radically different moral intuitions.
well,
So,
yeah,
so you think that
that's
like,
exactly where I was going next.
yeah,
It
yeah,
might fall out of the fact that I'm an egoist, and I would guess that you're not an egoist. So
yeah,
maybe,
but I think that like my intuitions here are so strong that it's gonna like for example, if your view requires you saying things like you can just kind of issue evacuation orders, and if civilians stay, they just become legitimate targets. Um, that's going to be reason to reject your view. Like I think that's like just a reductio on the view. I mean,
I don't see
maybe we
why.
have just these radically different intuitions, but like I just think normal people think that's like a ridiculous, barbaric, like uncivilized way to conduct war.
Are you an egoist or not?
I would not describe myself as an egoist now,
Okay. Well, that strikes me
depending on how it's
as
cashed out, I
very
could say.
wrong.
But yeah.
But if you're not an egoist, then that's a deeper difference we have, which is, I think, likely
Mm-hmm.
coloring your view of
My moral
this.
intuitions, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to say that, like, again, if egoism commits you to thinking that this is a legitimate way to act in war, where you sort of you launch military operations against some town, issue evacuation orders, and if civilians don't leave, like, you just get to indiscriminately bomb them. Like, that's like I don't know, like when you're talking to utilitarians, right? Like strict hedonic utilitarians, right? I'd imagine maybe you don't make these kinds of arguments, but one argument that I think is quite successful is like all of the ridiculous, unintuitive stuff that utilitarians have to commit to, right? Like, cases where, like, if someone's sleeping, you can do ridiculous things to them, stuff like that. And there, I think it's legitimate to do this kind of Morean shift where it's like, okay, if your view commits you to this, we know your view is wrong. And I think similarly here, if your view commits you to that kind of thing, being just, I think that we just know the view is wrong. Like, I'm just more confident that it's wrong to indiscriminately bomb civilians after you issue evacuation orders than I am that egoism is true, and that I think anyone should be that egoism is true.
Okay. Well, maybe this comes to an even deeper issue of epistemology. Like, how do you are into what you're calling intuitions? Are they a valid means of knowledge, or are you just going by emotions? In effect, is that basically what intuitions come down? You just have a feeling that something is so, and that you're taking that feeling as unquestionable, and that becomes
I think
your
all that's
basis
necessary
for
for the
reasoning.
argument. I'm sorry. I think all that's necessary for this argument is just that if some ethical system sort of entails ethical commitments you have reason to think are wrong, then you have reason to reject that ethical system. How we know those sort of ethical commitments are wrong is maybe is a relevant question, but just if you're just saying, yeah, no, I bite the bullet, right? Egoism does commit you to that sort of thing, then it's relevant. But I just see that as sort of similar to the utilitarian biting the bullet on, like, the sleeping woman cases. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to there, but
I have an idea. But
yeah, yeah, just the classic,
what
like,
you're calling a bullet, I wouldn't necessarily call a bullet.
mm-hmm,
Eh, Now, if you said that if you have reason to think something is wrong, then such and such follows, and I'm on board with that. But I don't think
mm-hmm.
reason is the same as intuition. I'm not even
I agree they're not the
convinced that
same. Yeah,
intuition is a valid concept, at least the way it's being used in this
sure. I
context.
mean, I guess I think so. I'm skeptical of lots of the way that people talk about intuition, um, but I don't think that you need a particularly thick concept of intuition to do the kind of move that I'm making. Like again, do you think that? I guess maybe you think that we can't know that if you're not an egoist, you shouldn't be confident that. Like, actually, I guess it's not clear to me what you think. What you think uh, egoism commits you to, because I think I hear different people sort of catch Randy and egoist catch it out in different ways, um, but do you think that, like, we can be confident that like not that, like, one reason why we think utilitarianism is false is because it gives us these results and we in some way know those results are wrong?
The way I think of utilitarianism is that the reason I think it's wrong is that it doesn't prioritize the individual. I just take that as um, I don't know if I should say
And that's just sort of
axiomatic,
foundational, or
but it's just the nature of the concept good. I think it's involves egoism, and I think egoism
mm-hmm.
is just something that falls out of an analysis of the concept good. And
So do you think, like, non egoistic concepts of the good are, like, unintelligible to you, or
ultimately, I don't think they are coherent. Like, I might be
okay,
able to understand them on some level in a limited way, but I think on full scrutiny, or
sure,
I
sure.
would, I don't think they ultimately hold up.
Sorry, by hold up, I guess I'm not sure. Like by coherent, do you mean it commits you to something we think is false, or,
Yeah,
like, do we think there's a
well,
contradiction
at
entailed,
least
or okay, yeah?
at least that.
But it seems like that's, I mean, but it seems like that's distinct from not being able to, like, grasp the concept, right? Like, I don't know, like I can grasp, like suppose I'm like a coherentist about justification. I can grasp what's meant by, or maybe some people want to say they can't grasp it, but like I might be able to grasp what's meant by non-inferential justification. I just think that thinking that there is that sort of thing gives you the wrong results or something. It seems like that's distinct from saying the concept isn't coherent.
Well, I think it's at some point in one's analysis of what good means, if you're not an egoist, at some point, I think the analysis is going to involve saying something is good without it being good for you. And at that point in the analysis, that's not coherent to me. Doesn't make any sense.
So you
There
don't
might
think
be
that it makes
other.
any sense to like intrinsically care about the interests of others? Like just the raw fact that it's in some person you care about's interest doesn't give you reason to do some action on your view. Like not just that it doesn't, but that you can't understand what that would mean.
Um, I think I understand. I guess I can understand what it means, but it seems entirely unjustified if it has nothing to do with your own interests. Like
It seems like that's kind of sorry.
if it doesn't at all impact my own interests, then I don't
Hmm.
see any reason why I should care about it. Now, I'll care about other people, right? Friends, loved ones,
Yeah,
romantic
yeah,
partners, but
but
that's
just
because
only
they matter to me.
because yeah.
And the reason I care about them is because they're a value to me. If they were not a value to me in any way, then I don't see a reason to care about them. Doesn't mean I won't have any. Doesn't mean I won't care about strangers because you can care
Yeah, no,
about people
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
at different
it's
levels.
just that the reason you care about strangers fundamentally is just like because their interests matter to you, right? It's
Yeah,
not their interests in and of itself.
yeah.
Um,
And
so
if I had
I guess there's
no,
a couple. Mhm.
if it made no difference to me, then I guess if I saw some other person, it would just be like Spock, in Star Trek, and
Mhm.
he's just kind of emotionless, and all he has to go on his reason. But I think reason without any emotion is pointless. It doesn't give you have no reason to do anything versus anything
Look,
else.
I'm I'm happy to take the Hume, reason is the slave to the passions view. That's I'm sympathetic to something like that. But I guess it seems like this is a more specific commitment. Like I guess what would you think about a case like this? So like imagine there's this person you care about, and they're going to be replaced by a body double, and the person is going to be tortured for eternity. But you're going to have your memory wiped after it, and they say, you know, we can promise you that like this new person, like it'll be in your interest. Maybe they'll give you like $5 in some trivial way to take this action, and so it's not going to affect you negatively in any way because your memory is going to be wiped and there's going to be this body double. But it's just going to be that there's this person you care about, unbeknownst to you, after this decision, is going to be spending eternity being tortured. You think that they're like you don't know, you don't think it makes any sense to say that you have reason to prevent them being tortured, or
Well, I guess if the if the I mean, so long as before I've taken, what was it? I take a pill and then my memory is wiped.
yeah, sure. Maybe you've got the Dennett evil neuroscientist. He shows up a lot in thought experiments. This guy's prolific. But you've got like evil neuroscientist who's going to come in and take this memory away from you or something,
Yeah, I mean,
and
I
also going
wouldn't
to give you
choose
like five
that. I
bucks.
wouldn't choose to have my loved one tortured. Um, but you're reminding me of Nozick's experience machine thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't see a good reason not to go into that machine if we stipulate that you would
It like makes
be
no
overall
difference.
happier than you otherwise
Yeah.
would, even if it
Um,
means you're never going to see your loved one, but you see your virtual loved one in the
your
world of
schmoved
the
one. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So it seems like then you should be interested in, or you should think that you should do the body switch torture. I mean, I find the experience machine. I mean, I think it's not an intuition. I'm super. I guess if I can avoid intuitions, I I don't think that you should get into the experience machine. But I'm less confident in that than I am in the saying no to the body double replacement and memory wipe case. But it seems like you. So are you saying you? Because it seems like in both cases, the reason you're saying that you would get into the experience machine and well, sorry, it seems like the reason you're saying you would get into the experience machine is just that it doesn't make any difference to you, and in fact makes your life better. And those are the only things that you should care about. But it seems like that's also true in the replacement case.
Maybe it is. I haven't thought about that sort of case. I'm trying to think of it right now off the top of my head. I want to make sure I understand it. So you're
Yeah.
offered, someone offers you to take this pill that will wipe your memory, and once you've done that, you're presented with this body double of your romantic partner, and you don't know that they're not the original, and your actual original romantic partner is being tortured, and the new one is somehow better than the original.
Yeah, we can say the new one's better, or we can say that like they also just give you like $20 or something. So it's your life is sort of made in some way better, and the only thing that changes to you, well, the only thing that changes in the world is this person you care about's interests are being like super duper violated or whatever, when they're being like super giga tortured. But that doesn't make any difference to you, at least in terms of your like your goals and your interests and your in the same way that it doesn't make a difference to you to jump into the experience machine, right?
Hmm. Yeah, maybe I would take that offer. I think I probably want to think about it some more
That's fair. Yeah.
before being confident about saying that. But I think I can say confidently that I should put my own interests first in every situation. That doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that I will never risk my life for someone else
Mm-hmm.
because,
Yeah, you
like,
might judge that
I might
watching
be
them die would be
miserable
worse than dying
without this
yourself, or
person. Um,
yeah. I'm
so,
not. I'm not. I don't think. Yeah, like I don't think Randian egoists are committed to like any of in the actual world these like, or at least I've heard explanations from Randians that seem like at least you know probably compelling for why like they're not committed to any of these anything like this in the real world or in the actual world. But it seems like you can sort of give these cases where it makes no difference to you, but these people you care about or other people, the interests of others are super radically violated for you to get some trivial gain. And it seems like most people want to say that you shouldn't take those sorts of options. But if you're saying, yeah, no, I think the view probably does commit you to saying that like, $20 for my life to be no different and this loved one of mine to be infinitely tortured. Um, yeah, I guess I view that as again similar to the stuff that utilitarians have to say, and similarly, the utilitarian can say like, well, no, it's just my concept of the good that it's just like experiences just have these valences. What it means to be good is to sort of maximize sort of positively. Would it be positively valenced, veiled positively? I'm not sure how you'd say that, but the sort of positive qualia, the pleasure qualia, right? And so it's just part of my concept, right? And I'm just more confident in that. But I just think still we have reason to reject utilitarianism, and we have reason to reject your egoism for the same reasons. But I'm
well, I
going to
think
imagine you're going to reject
if
that, yeah.
you are able to resort to unrealistic hypotheticals, then I think you can make a view look bad. So what I think is um, implausible is that these kinds of things are actually in the actual world in your self-interest. Yet I think a lot of people, maybe including you, would say that if you're an egoist in the actual world, that's going to lead to all manner of horrifying actions like lying,
In the
cheating,
actual world,
stealing, robbing, raping, murdering, pillaging. That's what an actual egoist does. And I say
that's not my
that's
view, no.
okay, well, maybe that doesn't include you then, but I think that is a
Yeah.
very common view.
Although I
So,
guess it does lead you to saying things like Israel's indiscriminate bombing of civilians is totally chill and good, actually, which I think is like pretty
well, no, I don't.
unintuitive.
I don't think so. See, I think that's a straw man of what Israel is doing,
Well, no,
and
but
I
you
think
agreed
that's
that. Okay, sorry. I'll clarify. Conditional on them issuing evacuation orders, indiscriminate bombing of civilians is permissible. Because again, that is
I
what you
s-
endorsed.
I s- I still I wouldn't characterize what they're doing as indiscriminate bombing. If they're targeting certain infrastructure, I don't consider that to be indiscriminate.
Well, actually, yeah, right. In the case I described, they're discriminating and targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure.
Oh,
So you're
I
right. They're
thought,
not being indiscriminate. They're
well,
being
it
discriminate
wasn't
in exactly the wrong way, right?
it wasn't that they were, my understanding of it, the example wasn't that they were targeting civilians. It was that they happened to kill civilians who refused to leave
Yeah,
the
but they're targeting
infrastructure that was
civilian
being targeted.
infrastructure.
They were
Yeah, they're
targeting the
targeting civilian
infrastructure,
infrastructure. Yeah,
and
yeah.
there were civilians in there, but it wasn't the civilians that were being targeted, it was the
It's
infrastructure.
the infrastructure. Yeah, yeah. They're
Yeah.
discriminately targeting civilian infrastructure, not and don't care that civilians are in there, or
No,
maybe
they
don't
do.
care is the
That's
wrong
why
word,
they
but it
issued the
doesn't.
order. They do care. Otherwise,
Sure,
they
sure,
wouldn't have given the evacuation
yeah,
order.
sure, but the civilians being in there doesn't give them strong enough reason to not bomb the civilian infrastructure. So like I agree that you're not committed to maybe these like more everyday problems, but you're committed to this like justification of this actual ridiculous military action, which I think is a problem. Like that's how we got here, right? Is that there's this this is that you endorsed indiscriminate, where indiscriminate is being used to refer to um, just bombing civilian infrastructure after issuing evacuation orders, despite knowing there are significant civilians in there. Um, like,
Yeah, I don't think
and
it's
I
fair to
thought
call
that was
that
silly, and
indiscriminate.
then we got there. I guess, yeah. If you don't want to call that indiscriminate, we can call that indiscriminate. Well, I was trying to do the replace it with sh, but it's too close, so we can call it schmindiscriminant. Um, um, but just referring to again, like like is there a number of civilians where that wouldn't be true? Like if it was 10 billion civilians and you wanted to, and the sort of military goal was to impose consequences on civilians in order to try to get them to be more resistant to the militant group you're fighting, and they just refuse to leave.
I
I
don't think
think like it's
numbers is relevant. I
okay.
mean, you
So
do what it
you think
takes to
10
get
billion
victory.
civilians?
Whatever it
So you think
takes
10
to
billion
achieve victory.
civilians to
Yeah,
achieve
if
these
that's
sort
what's
of
necessary
pressures?
for if that's what's necessary to achieve victory and safeguard your own population, then take out 10 billion.
Okay,
I
well,
don't think it is
so I
necessary.
do think you
Now,
are.
I think they could
Well,
have
sure, sure,
achieved
yeah.
this much easier. Like if they had gotten rid of Hamas decades ago, there wouldn't even have been this war. So if they had been strong from the beginning, instead of allowing terrorists to fester for years or decades, then the civilian casualty would have been far lower. So that's why I think they've
Well,
been far too weak.
I guess bracketing that.
Ironically,
So,
being
yeah.
stronger results in fewer casualties.
Well, that's like a specific sort of historical counterfactual that I think would require a bit more to get into. But I just so your view is that in pursuing sort of pressuring civilian populations to be less um, friendly to a militant group you're opposed to and you're in a war against, you can kill 10 billion civilians if you issue evacuation orders and then they don't leave.
I think it might depend on the so there's
Insofar as you
differences
achieve the relevant
in
military advantage. Yeah.
so there's babies, right? That's part of the civilian population. There's also
Suppose they're all
adults.
adults. Yeah.
So babies are innocents. Um,
Lots
Adults,
of
if they
babies.
are
Lots of
supported,
babies in Gaza.
and it's tragic that they die, but I
Well, no,
put the
but
blame on Hamas for that.
do you?
Um,
Okay. I guess that's a separate question, but I guess I'm not sure why you'd say like babies are like why you'd introduce that distinction because it doesn't seem like that actually changes it that much, right? Like Gaza's population is actually super low. Does that give you any more reason to, or super young rather? Does that give you Israel any more reason to be more discriminate against in terms of not targeting civilian infrastructure?
if they're super young,
Yeah. Did you not know
maybe.
that Gaza's population was
No, no,
like I
I've
think it's
heard
the
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that might give some reason, but I believe they are. brainwashed from the time they're young to hate Israel.
I just like if I see Israel dropping a building on my brother's head, I don't think I need any brainwashing to hate Israel. Like I just don't think they need to. Like I agree, Hamas does like media stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with Farfour the Mouse, a victim of Israel, but like I agree they do. I just don't think that's why they dislike Israel or are oppositional to Israel. I think it has a lot more to do with like seeing their loved ones who are civilians killed, probably. Like that, like basically everybody would respond with hatred towards the country that does that, like
I don't think that's the basic reason why um, anti-Israel people hate Israel. I think
well
there's
that's a
a
broader I'm just
philosophical
talking about
difference.
Gazans.
Yeah, for them as well. I think
Hmm.
they're brainwashed from a young age to think Israel is evil. It's a secular, relatively secular country. They don't bow to Allah, and
I
anyone who
mean,
doesn't do that
maybe relatively
is
secular. They still have religious
offended,
courts. Also, like
offensive.
lots of Christians, like George Habash founded the PFLP, was a Christian guy, not particularly friendly to Muslims. Well, friendly to Muslims, but not like doctrinally. Still not a big fan of Israel. Like I don't think it's the religious question. Like Gazan Palestinians, or sorry, Christian Palestinians are not fans of Israel either. I don't think it's the Muslim religion that explains it. And again, like it just seems really implausible to me that like what explains Gazan people's hostility to Israel isn't that the vast majority of them are going to know civilians killed by Israel, but is instead like some like ridiculous jihadist commitment or some propagandization. Like I just think, like, do you not think that in the vast majority of cases, if you see a militant group kill your civilian friend, you're going to be hostile to that country?
No, it depends on the reason. Why are they hostile? Like, if I know that the reason my country is being attacked is because I'm part of a militant movement, whose goal is to annihilate the state of Israel, which is in the charter of Hamas from '88, I believe, then I'm going to understand. Oh yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe it's because we were been shooting rockets at them and slaughtering their
Well,
people
lots of
on.
people. Well, when you say again, this is the sort of collectivist brain rot that you have. When you say we, you say we've been shooting rockets. The civilians haven't been shooting rockets. The civilians don't have any agency over who's shooting rockets or not. This is like your sort of nationalist, collectivist brain rot.
I don't. Okay, well,
Like who's we, right? It's the national. It's not the individual, certainly.
uh, alarm bells are going off a little bit when you say I'm suffering from brain rot. I
Sure,
mean,
sure. Maybe we can call it.
you
What
want to
there's a term
disagree with
Rand
me?
has for the
Okay.
How am I
Um,
blanking on the term? It's a great term that Rand has for like the way that collectivism acts like a disease. Oh, like a mental disease. There's a phrase she uses. I'm blanking on it. Maybe I mean you'd know better than. Do you know what I'm talking about?
for a term for other than collectivism.
She has like this. It's like a couple word phrase for like collectivism acting like a mental disease. It's she uses it in a couple. It's not important, but all I'm saying is just I can use words other than brain rot or brain poison. I can use I was gonna replace it with the phrase, but I forgot the phrase. But all I'm saying is just that again, when you say we, it's because you have this sort of collectivist vision of responsibility and
No,
moral
I don't.
responsibility.
I've said there are innocent people on the other side, like the babies. I don't hold them responsible for anything. So I'm
Yeah,
looking
but you
at
think
them
it's
as
just to.
individuals. I'm saying, and I said, tragically, there are some innocent people on the other side that die.
No,
So
but you said
I'm
the
not
reason they
denying
would
their.
understand it is because we launched rockets. Who's we there? It's their national identity, and you're saying that they should understand they're
Well, that
responsible, or
we can
that
be used in a sense, like if I say, um,
No,
Like if
the point isn't that the use of we is collectivist. The point is that you're saying that somebody should understand their civilian friend's death because we, where we is being used to refer to a national identity, did something. Like that's like classically like collective responsibility thinking that I understand individualism to be opposed to.
if I'm okay, so maybe we should give some more identity to the person I was vocalizing the thoughts of. So let's
Hmm.
say I'm well, we could do this different ways. We could say I'm one of the brainwashed people
Yeah,
in
someone who committed a
Gaza.
thought crime. Yeah,
What? Thought
I'm saying
crime?
you think they committed thought crimes. Yeah, right. By believing things you think are immoral, right? By supporting Hamas, not substantial, but like just in their beliefs.
I don't know like how to categorize it exactly. Like where's
Well,
are
it's
the if
a
you are
problematic kind of thought
brainwashed,
that
you
renders
have
them responsible and due less consideration than others, right?
I don't
I
know
take
if you
that to be a
can
kind of
be
thought crime.
um like I don't know to what degree you have moral responsibility for your views if you've been brainwashed from age 0. But I also am not sure that it matters. Like take a bear. If I shoot a bear in the woods who is attacking me, I don't hold the bear morally responsible. It's just its nature that it attacks a human being if it's hungry, let's suppose. But I'm going to kill it,
Hmm.
whether I morally blame it or not. And likewise,
Sure.
whether someone has been brainwashed and maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't up to them. But either way, I'm gonna eliminate them if that person is a threat to me, and I think
Well, sure, but
justifiably so.
mhm.
So
Yeah, no,
if
that you're sort of not engaging with what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that in your view, there's this. You said earlier that one thing that means that military or civilian infrastructure is a more legitimate target is that there's this sort of support, just purely in terms of belief from the population of Hamas, like when they're polled and stuff. And I'm saying that, like, what you're saying is that if they believe the wrong things, it's more legitimate to like bomb their water plants, and that I think is what's relevantly similar to like the concept of a thought crime.
well, I don't know
Like you
if it's
understand why that's like
just
ridiculous anti-individualist nonsense, right?
uh, no. I think
So
it might
to be clear, what
depend
you don't
on.
understand is how saying that somebody's like water desalination plant is a more legitimate target for military action if they believe things you think are immoral. You don't understand how that's like anti-individualist.
I don't know if it's
Like
just if belief is sufficient. I did use the phrase aiding and abetting Hamas at some point,
well,
I
no,
think.
you referenced polling.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I take it that what
And I
polls express are people's
polls
beliefs usually.
show that I think most Palestinians support Hamas, but
Yeah, where
I mean,
support is understood
yeah,
doxastically,
we didn't.
right? Like
I don't know that we fleshed that out much. What exactly does that mean? Support? Does that mean they would, provide them shelter, like a place to hide out?
usually
Does
they're
it mean something
well,
else?
usually what these questions are asking, like the ones that have gone viral, are things like, "Do you approve of?" or "Do you think it was justified to?" Like the specific October 7th ones are usually, "Do you think October 7th was justified?" or "Do you think that do you approve of October 7th?" Like both of those are just purely talking about belief. And when you talk about the sort of organization as a whole, usually they're trying to cash it out because they want to isolate these like just belief. Like they don't want to include people who like they want to just be measuring this sort of like attitude of belief and sort of appraise how they appraise them, and they don't want people to be mistaking the question for, well, I think they're good but I wouldn't support them in the sense of like doing things for them, like when these polls, the ones that go viral, are designed specifically to try to get people's beliefs.
Okay.
Like it's usually stuff like, do you approve of Hamas or October 7th? Like that's a very common one, or obviously it's usually in Arabic, but the equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm. If
And your
that's,
view
I
is
mean,
that
if that's
those
all it
polls were
is, like,
evidence. Mhm.
if them supporting Hamas doesn't mean they would provide shelter, for example, for Hamas to hide out in. If all it means
Hmm.
is like they're glad that October 7th happens, I guess I'm not convinced that that would make them legitimate targets.
And their civilian infrastructure wouldn't be legitimate targets. So we agree that the
Well,
polls that you
that I
cited
don't
as
know. I don't
evidence.
know. I guess
Well, that's what
I'm at least
all I
open
was
to
talking about.
entertaining the idea that civilian infrastructure could be a legitimate target, even if civilians themselves aren't a legitimate target.
Yeah. No, so earlier we were discussing like whether or not the way this came up was we were discussing like destruction of civilian infrastructure. And you said one of the things that made that more legitimate was because when polled, Palestinians, express like approval of and support for Hamas. And I'm saying that like all that tells you is their beliefs, right? And so I don't think that somebody believing stuff you think is immoral means that you get to sort of bomb their desalination plants.
I mean, if that's all that was happening, like people believing something is immoral, but if there's a war going on and these people who believe this immoral thing are supporting uh, the evil regime, Hamas, who was
So
actually
to be
doing
clear, by support,
stuff.
do you mean anything over and above like approval?
No, for right now, I just mean they are glad that Hamas is doing what it's doing. I don't mean
Sure.
they're like actively providing shelter for
Yeah,
Hamas.
yeah.
So if it's not, I don't think it's simply that they have immoral beliefs. It's that
Hmm.
plus the fact that they are at least morally supporting this aggressive regime.
Well, yeah, but
So
that's just a
if
kind
they
of
were
belief.
only had if they were only like there are people in the West in United States who support Hamas. I don't
Hmm.
think they should be targeted.
You don't think we can bomb the Columbia subways or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but this is just more sort of collectivist, like group identity based stuff, right? Like it's just the fact that they happen to be in the wrong place. That means that in some cases you think thought crimes are not reasons to justify bombing civilian infrastructure, and then in other cases you think that thought crimes are a reason to bomb civilian infrastructure. And it's just the only difference is just whether you're in proximity of like if the group you're supporting is like in proximity of you. That seems ridiculous, right?
Well, I think the proximity is not all there is that's relevant here. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say, let me try to flesh out more what I had in mind. If um, this applies to the Iran war as well. I think if the U.S. were more aggressive in destroying civilian infrastructure, that would make the civilian population put pressure on Hamas or the IRGC, the Iranian theocracy, to stop this war. Um,
Mm-hmm.
whereas if they're just able to continue living fine and all their infrastructure is intact and they're not suffering any, then they're less likely to urge their government to stop acting aggressively. That's
Mm-hmm.
the
Do
kind
you
of
think
thing I had in
9/11
mind.
was justified for, or would be justified for similar reasons, like to try to impose, like make people less likely to vote for interventionist policy and
Was
support that? Because, well,
9/11
I guess in that
justified?
case, you might even say that they're more justified, right? Because not only do they hold these beliefs, they have way more direct sort of pressure on the state than either Gazans or Iranians do.
Wait, I'm not understanding the question. Are you asking was it justified for the people who flew the building planes into the buildings to do that?
Yeah, because the point is, the principle you've now given is that you can use, in at least many cases, you can destroy and attack civilian infrastructure um, in order to sort of try to pressure people into opposing a regime for that's doing immoral things. I guess
If it's
maybe
an
you don't
aggressive
think that
regime.
like if it's an aggressive, you don't think that the U.S. was an aggressive regime in its conduct in the Middle East during like the
Mm,
Cold War, for example.
at least for the most part, I don't think they were the initiators of problems in the Middle East.
Well, that's distinct. Surely that's not what's meant by aggression, right? Like if my neighbor is in a fight with somebody else and I go over and I punch my neighbor, the fact that there was existing problems before doesn't mean I'm not aggressing on my neighbor, right? So surely that can't be the problem.
Well, what is the? I think the prior context does matter. What did you say? If
So
you punch your neighbor after he punched you?
no, I'm saying my neighbor's in a fight with some random guy, and so there's this like, there's this. So it's not like I start the fight or I start the violence, but I go over and I punch my neighbor for no reason. Like the fact that he's already in a fight isn't relevant, just in the same sense that the fact that there was like lots of turmoil in the Middle East shouldn't be relevant to whether or not the U.S. is engaged in aggression in the Middle East.
Yeah, if it just
Okay.
turmoil per se wouldn't
Okay.
justify you coming in, but if it's like someone is attacking your ally or someone is nationalizing your oil property, or if someone takes your diplomats hostage for over a year and tortures them, then we're not just talking about some random act of violence in another country.
Yeah, I agree. It's not random, but so your view is that the U.S. was in no way aggressive in our conduct in the like, 'cause like in lots of cases, the U.S. was purely like doing things like funding militias in countries because those countries were friendly to the USSR, um, or the regime. Maybe we don't want to say those countries as a whole, right? But in cases like that where it's just that they're deciding to ally with someone you are opposed to, sort of politically, it seems like that's like funding militant groups in that country is a kind of aggression. It's also I just am sort of generally opposed to this kind of like methodological nationalism where we talk about things like national identities and you can do things like aggress on nations, right? Like I think that's anti-individualist in this important way. But putting that aside, even if we want to talk in that way, it doesn't think like, or I don't think that it makes sense to describe lots of what the U.S. was doing as non-aggressive.
Well, we could go through
And it
some
seems like,
specific
given that you think that,
examples.
I guess
I mean, I
maybe
gave some
actually
examples.
here's some one way to do it. Suppose it was the case that the U.S. was engaged in aggression in Afghanistan in the Cold War. Do you think then it would be legitimate to issue an evacuation order and then do 9/11?
Um, if it it might depend on the extent of the aggression, like how serious it was.
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes countries do bad things. I think every country does some bad things. No country is perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think
Mm.
every bad thing any country ever does anywhere justifies annihilating that country. There
Mm.
are, more modest steps one can take, like
Well,
economic
I thought we didn't have to.
sanctions.
I thought we didn't have to tie our hands behind our back like that. Like earlier you were saying that it was we don't have to tie our hands behind our back and do things like care about or
Well, I
not
think
bomb
the
civilian infrastructure
punishment
with
should fit the
civilians in it,
crime.
right?
The punishment should fit the crime,
Yeah,
but
yeah. The
I,
punishment of the civilians should fit the crime, where the crime is remaining after an evacuation order, um, because your country has aggressed on the other. Um, like what? I feel like we keep getting to this point where you endorse these ridiculous anti-individualist things. Um, when I think intuitively it seems like you agree you don't want to endorse these kinds of things, right? Like suppose the sort of thing that like kind of like people's history people say about the U.S. involvement in the Middle East during the Cold War was true. It seems like then you might want to say that targeting um, civilian infrastructure in the U.S. like 9/11 would be justified, and that seems ridiculous.
all right. Well, what you're calling ridiculous anti-individualist views, I don't think I agree with. So,
You don't agree they are anti-individualist, or you don't agree that you endorse those? Because I think
Well,
things like thought crimes
I
are
don't.
kind of
I've kind of
anti-individualist.
lost track on what exactly you're. I mean, I don't think I'm ever endorsing ridiculous anti-individualist views. I mean,
Well,
if I thought
I'd
that, I
imagine you don't think
wouldn't
that,
be
yeah.
yeah. So I think it's
But that's not
well,
like a response to the argument, is it? Like just so I could say I don't think I'm endorsing, I think that you are endorsing anti-individualist views, but just saying what you think your views are, I don't think is like particularly responsive to the argument, right? The point is that you endorse like targeting people's water desalination plants for the crime of supporting the wrong country, where support is understood purely belief terms. And I think that's like a kind
no,
of
because I've
wait.
distinguished between like people in the U.S. who hold certain beliefs, people who are elsewhere, and
Yeah, and then when we
you
equalize
before
those cases,
you were saying you were discounting the point about how I think babies are innocent, and you said I was having you're holding a kind of collectivist view. So I think
yeah.
sometimes during this conversation you're mischaracterizing or misattributing to me views.
Well, I think you're
Um,
entirely unable to explain why they're not collectivist. Because again, your view is that because of sort of arbitrary circumstances of someone's birth, they are their infrastructure is a legitimate target, and in other cases, it's not. And it seems like that's anti-individualist. We should be taking these things at the individual level, right?
I don't think that means like if you happen to be born in uh, an aggressive country and you die as a result, like whether you're an innocent baby in Hamas in Gaza or you're an
Well, it's
innocent
not that you happen to
baby
die as a
in
result. It's that your water desalination plant that is totally non-military infrastructure is a legitimate target. Right.
Mm.
It's not like you're trying to get the Hamas guys and there's a baby nearby. It's like if you are born in the wrong place and have the wrong thoughts, you get to bomb your water desalination plants. And that's like we agree that's nonsense, right? Like that's anti-individualist.
I'm not
Unfortunately, you can't say
convinced
no to that. I wish you could say no
I'm
to
not
that.
convinced you've characterized my view correctly when you said
Okay.
if you have the wrong beliefs, you're
Where
born
the
in the
relevant
wrong
beliefs are,
place.
yeah, being born in Gaza, and the wrong beliefs are approving of Hamas. Because you cited both of those as justifying the targeting of civilian infrastructure to try to pressure um,
I'm writing this down.
civilians to resist the regime. Go for it, yeah. So what you gave as a reason why it was legitimate to target civilian infrastructure was because when polled, Palestinians express approval for Hamas, right? And so and you said, okay, that's not all it takes. It also takes this like being in proximity and maybe a member of the same nation, right? And so those two features are what you said justified the bombing of civilian desalination plants.
And I also said uh, later in the conversation a few minutes ago that by bombing the civilian infrastructure, that could put pressure on
Mm-hmm.
Hamas.
Yeah,
So I think that's relevant.
sure. But
So if
the
that
point is
maybe that
that
ends the war sooner, and less
so
people end up
so
dying as a result.
well, that's now you're introducing these sort of consequentialist considerations. I agree that if it just does turn out that bombing the civilian desalination plant, you know, is really likely to make the war end sooner, then maybe unfortunately you should do that. You know, all else equal, right? Like there's going to be lots of things that I think are going to contribute to that. But that's now you're introducing these consequentialist considerations that I didn't take you to be introducing in the first place.
Well,
Because it
I'm
seems like you
always a
don't want to say that like
consequentialist.
say that again.
I've always been like I don't know how the I always think consequences matter. So I don't feel like I've ever just like
Well, not sorry.
ignored
The consequences that
consequences.
matter are not the interests, are only the interests of Israel, right? Because they're the aggressed upon nation. Like like you said earlier, that you could bomb 10 billion people if you in civilian infrastructure if they didn't leave when you issued an evacuation order, right? So it doesn't seem like you care about consequences in the sense of like the thing that matters most are like the net number of people who suffer or the like humanitarian consequences, right?
Well, the consequences that matter most are the consequences on yourself.
Sure.
Consequences always matter, but those are the most important ones to consider.
It seems like you think they're the only ones, at least that are intrinsically, right? Like all of the other consequences are going to be instrumentally worth considering, but not intrinsically valuable, right?
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
the,
my
the, the point
egoism.
is just that you're interested in introducing these kind of considerations in some cases, but like here's a way that the war would actually end. Because what the reason I care about ending the war is because I think the war causes like ridiculous suffering and people who don't deserve it perish and stuff like that. But what would prevent that is you know not invading a country and killing plausibly at least both directly and indirectly, hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of civilians, even. Um,
Sounds
like
like you're
that would
calling Israel the
probably.
aggressor.
I just said they invaded. Do you
Yeah,
disagree that they
well,
invaded Gaza?
after they were invaded by Hamas.
Sure. I don't think that. Like the point was just that if the goal was genuinely these humanitarian considerations, obviously the move is not to kill hundreds of thousands of civilians, right?
No, I think the world will be much better, safer if you get rid of Hamas once and for all. If you
Okay. Well,
allow them to kill, there's
I
going
think
to be
it's
another October 7th if you don't get rid of them. It's just a matter
Well,
of
I
time.
think you know how many October 7th you would need in order to get to anywhere near the number of civilians who are dying as a result of the war. It's quite a few. Like, do you really think that if Hamas isn't eliminated, more Israeli civilians will die than have been killed in Gaza? There's no way you believe that.
It's not about numbers, though. Even if there aren't as many, the point of the Israeli government, the proper purpose is to protect Israeli citizens, not the
Yeah, yeah, because you're
citizens
a sort
of
of naturalist or a nationalist, right? Like you think that what matters is the national interest, not like these interests of these collections
self-interest.
of individuals. Well,
Self-interest.
self-interest qua national interest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
So you're
Israel's
not interested in
self-interests will be best served if it gets rid of Hamas.
then I don't know why you're introducing these like other humanitarian considerations, like because you don't care about those humanitarian considerations,
I
right?
do. I care
The-
about innocent people dying, like the babies who have no responsibility at all. It's tragic. I wish they didn't have to die.
yeah, you just think it's sort of worth it for Israel to inflict these casualties because the
If it's
relevant
necessary,
casualties were
if
born in the
it's
wrong place.
necessary in order for Israel to protect its own people, then yes, I support it.
Yeah, because they were born in the wrong place, right?
Yeah, tragically, it's not their fault. It's Hamas's fault. That's whose fault it is. Who
So to be
brought
clear,
that
your
war
view is
on
that
them?
the people responsible for the civilian deaths are not the people dropping the bombs. It's the people.
No, it's the
It's
people who
somebody
made them
else.
need to drop the bombs for their own safety. So there's not another October
Do you think
7th.
that okay? So to be clear, you think that like do you think that Israel, if it was in like if they thought that the only way to sort of surely prevent a single civilian death was to wipe out all of Gaza, you think it'd be just for them to wipe out all of Gaza?
Maybe.
Okay. Like I just don't know why you're introducing you're saying you think it's like tragic or whatever when you think that it like generally things that I care about, right? Like when I say that I care about like civilian deaths, what that means is like I think that we should do things to prevent them and we should not take actions that cause them, even if it might cause some other things that we think are objectionable, right? Like I just don't know why you're pretending to care about civilian death if you think that Israel
I
would
don't
be
know why.
justified
I
in
don't. I
totally
don't see
wiping out.
what's confusing about this. I think it's very straightforward. I don't want innocent people to die, but I am an
Yeah,
egoist.
but you
So if
care
the
about
only
that
way
less
for
than you
me to
care
serve my
about.
self-interest is for innocent people to die on the other side, then tragically I have to support that.
Okay, yeah, you care more about Israel's national interest than you care about like then you would care about like literally infinite people dying, right? So Gazans
Yeah,
dying, to
because
be clear.
Israel is pro-life.
So
It's a
so
pro-life civilization.
so it's pro. So you think you're so pro-life that you're pro, killing
Getting rid
literally
of
infinite
cancer.
people.
I'm in favor of getting rid of cancer on
I think
life.
they're people, not cancers, right? Like you understand that you now sound exactly
I think
like the
people can
villain of an Ayn
understand what I
Rand
mean by
novel,
that.
right?
I
Like you
think
sound
people
like
can
the villain of an
understand.
Ayn Rand novel. Like you're talking about thought crimes. You're talking about. I probably have to go, but you've now endorsed things like thought crimes. You've endorsed like methodological naturalism. You've endorsed this kind of like collective responsibility.
No.
It's all quite silly, and it's all anti-individualist. But yeah, I gotta go get the mail. But I would consider sort of revising my views if I were you.
All right. Bye. Okay. What next? Let me look at the chat. Q was fine with the label of indiscriminate before. I was. I don't remember saying that. If I did, it would only be justified if that's the only way it's necessary. I might have said that. Oh yeah, I think I remember something like that. I think I said at one point, if the only way to destroy your enemy is indiscriminate bombing, then I would be okay in that case. But I don't think it, in fact, is the only way to defeat the enemy. I'd be interested to chat about socialism at some point, by the way. Maybe that can be a bit more linear, or theism. Maybe. If it can be civil. I was starting to wonder at the end there when you were saying I think you used the word silly to describe my view. You said I was sounded like an Ayn Rand villain. Um, so I was starting to wonder if civility was slipping. I do like to keep it civil here. If the word silly offended you, I can be more careful with my language. That's my bad. Every time, or like at least many times when people use language like that, I could equally use it myself going the other way. Like, you think my view is silly? Well, I think your view is silly. You think my view is ridiculous? I think your view is ridiculous, right? But I don't think it's really helpful for a. I mean, I'm not like universally against ever in any case using language like that, but for the most part, at least, I try to not use language like that, um, and just stick more to, I don't know, terminology that is less likely to antagonize. So, yeah, if we talk again, then let's try to tone down the language a little bit. And I know I have different standards than a lot of people, most people, because I think I know a lot of people um, are much they use much harsher language, and they'll insult each other and call each other names, and it can get very nasty. And I don't like doing that, so I have different standards here because that's part of being an egoist. I enjoy it more. I think it's more conducive to my happiness to have civil debates. I used to get in much more heated debates many, many years ago, but I didn't like that. So I've taken a different approach. I think emphasizing why a reductio is supposed to be unappealing is sometimes important. Yeah, and it's not always obvious, like where a good place to draw the line is between good uses of the term silly to characterize your opponent's view and not good uses. And I don't have it all worked out, but it is something that I am sensitive to and think about sometimes. Yeah, there's edge cases for sure. I wouldn't think my use of silly is over the line. Um, you might be right. So, as I said, it made me start to wonder. I'm not sure that's problematic, but it did make me start to wonder. I mean, not just that, but as that as well as saying that I sounded like an Ayn Rand villain. Um, I'll be more careful next time we chat. Okay. I feel like describing killing civilians as eliminated a cancer is Ayn Rand-esque. I wasn't I had Hamas primarily in mind. That's the cancer. It's not the innocent babies, which I said multiple times is tragic that they should die. That's not innocent people are not the cancer, like the innocent babies. The cancer is Hamas. And maybe also people who support, if at least by support is meant provide safe haven to, and that would not be something an Ayn Rand villain says. An Ayn Rand hero would want to wipe out Hamas. I think they should think we were launching rockets, so I get it comment was also consistent with an Ayn Rand villain. I would disagree with you there. I've even heard other objectivist intellectuals talk about this very point. Have you read Ayn Rand's? Now, a person who says that, like if it's a um, like an innocent 3-year-old who says um, they think we were launching rockets, so I get it. Um, well, I mean, I think anyone should, if they're thinking correctly about this, I think anyone should agree that Israel is justified in attacking, even if that results in some civilian casualties. But I don't think that's something an Ayn Rand villain would say. An Ayn Rand villain would more likely be an altruist and say, "Oh no, just accept it. Take all the October 7th you need to in order to avoid take all the casualties you need to on your own side in order to avoid killing any innocents on the other." That would more likely be what the Ayn Rand villain would say.